We need to get something set up to more permanent here. But anyways, man.
New York City office space, man. Everything is temporary and meant to be moved.
If I ever get famous and I ever start pontificating about crap I have no clue about, I give you permission to just kick me right in the balls, all right? Whether it's on a podcast or an award ceremony.
You're basically only, the only thing blocking this is you getting famous.
It's going to happen, man. It's going to happen. You know, people just like to, once you get known in one area, whether it's Twitter or whatever, you
become an expert in all areas.
In all areas.
Yeah.
So that's just one thing that literally grinds my gears. But I don't know. I guess it's good people are honest about where they're coming from and stuff. But sometimes they're so wrong. And I'm just like.
It's interesting when.
The economic stuff really bothers me.
That too. Really gets you. When someone that's really smart in one area starts talking about. That mic almost just hit you in the face. Someone that's really smart in one area starts talking about subjects in other areas that you just happen to know about. And because they have a massive Twitter following, everyone's following along and they're like, oh, that's so smart. That's so you're so right. And you're just like, no, that's.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think there's a name for it, which is like how in areas we're not experts, we trust the experts. But then in the areas where you're an expert, you know that there's so much about the theory and the best practices and the knowledge that is like tenuous or driven by ideology or bias, right? I think there's a term for it.
Interesting.
It's like, you see what I'm saying though?
Yeah.
If you were we're programmers, so if we were sitting in front of a class and the professor was like, object-oriented programming is the dominant paradigm and it replaced everything and it's the best way to do it. You'd be like, wait, no, there's way more nuance to that.
No, that's kind of true.
Or someone was saying the same thing about functional. Like, there's way more nuance to it than that. And like, whether you prefer one paradigm or the other is a lot driven by your experience. So many things. There's so much to it.
Right.
But then when a doctor tells you, oh, you need to get your, prostate exam when you're 40, you're like, oh, okay, that's like, you're an expert. I know it. But then you dig into those subjects and you realize like, wow, it's exactly the same thing. Imagine that there's as little consensus around things like, should you get, a breast exam or your prostate checked or, a PSA test or all these things that, I was just listening to this episode of a podcast that was talking about like medical over, exams and, too much medicine, and it's the same kind of thing, right? It's just interesting. So, but we're so quick to be like, oh, okay, that's an expert. Must be true. So that's why these days I'm just like, no one knows anything. I'm just skeptical of everything, and I'm just doing my little thing in my little world, and I ignore the rest.
There you go. Everyone's right but you. You're the only one that's right.
We'll see how it works. There's some cash right here. Just cash hanging out. This is actually because we went to this Felt meet. I went to this Felt meetup. You were bummed back in Jersey, I think.
Yeah, I didn't come in that day.
Just bumming it.
If I don't come into New York City for work, there's a no chance I'm coming in for a meetup.
It was pretty fun. This Felt's cool, man. We got to check it out. I'm interested in it.
Nice.
We like learned Vue and React, in a short period of time, and so I was like, all right, I'm good for now. But like, Svelte is pretty interesting. I definitely want to check it out. It's actually related to some of the stuff that I was dealing with working on the Mirage site in the last week, which is like sometimes you want an imperative escape hatch. Mm-hmm. In that sense, well, Svelte is still declarative. I can't really speak to it. I need to use it more, but I think it's more honest about the parts of your app where you want to do something. You just want to do some code. Whereas React, you could, in some sense, see it as the extreme version that everything must be wrapped in a declarative interface, basically.
Yep.
And in order to write imperative code that like runs in a one-off way, you have to have deep knowledge about how to like use imperative handle or use callback or something to escape. The default is to just re-render and rerun it, and so all your stuff all your code has to be declarative and idempotent and all that stuff.
I mean, it's really like you have to know, you have to be comfortable with using ref, right?
Yeah,
and use ref is easy, right? It's super easy to understand, but when you open up the docs and you see things like...
Dude, it's not... Give me my phone right now. Give me my phone.
When you open up the docs and you see things like, don't use this, and then people on Twitter are like, every time you use ref, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
that has you seriously questioning, like, oh, is there a better way to do this? And I think it's super easy to get trapped in and just waste a lot of time.
Yeah. Whereas if it almost encouraged you, oh, this is like the best way to do this today. Yeah,
Yes.
that's 100%. What was I going to say? I actually found in the docs for React recently that the usePrevious example is there, and they say it's even such a common use case it might be added to React. UsePrevious value. Remember we talked like a few weeks ago, and you were like, I don't think that's bad. And I was like, no, I think if you are using if you're using a ref and comparing a previous value during a render cycle to the current value in order to do something, you're wrong. Like you're doing something wrong because you shouldn't care. You should be able to take the state of the world and re-render your app. And it shouldn't matter what the previous version was because UI is a function of state. So it's not UI as a function of like state n-1 plus state n. And so we were using it. It feels like a hack when you have to use it because it's something like, oh, did this value change from this particular thing to this? And in this case, do this one branch of logic. Whereas that doesn't feel like normally how we express our UI as a function of state.
Right. That's funny. Isn't
that interesting?
I mean, that's really an admission of like this model doesn't work, and we should. It's okay to have some imperative things.
Yeah, and it's not even saying like, oh, this is like a smear on the hooks API. It's more just like if you're going to if this is the reality of working with hooks, that often you have to go out of the paradigm. I would just feel so much more comfortable if the guides said something like, even if the first guides were like, hooks encourage a declarative, always re-render to express your entire app as a function of state, and this is why the default behavior is this. However, the reality of modern stateful UI development today is that you are often going to want to escape this for a variety of reasons. Maybe you're making a post request to the server and you can't just do that over and over again the way you can set the document title over and over again based on some state. Maybe you're animating from a collapsible panel that's closed to open, and expressing these sorts of things declaratively, idempotently as functions of your state that you hold in the business logic of your JavaScript app turns out to be extremely hard and actually not worth it. And so let's start by going over the cases, which is the 80% case which works, and then let's talk about some examples where it falls down and where you want to escape it. And so like that would change it completely for me. Mm-hmm. Whereas instead it's not like that. It's like, oh, don't think about life cycles. You're thinking about it wrong. You should really think about synchronizing effects with state. What if that's so hard that it's impractical to do so, and that like using a previous hook, like using a previous value as a hook, makes it way simpler, and in fact is what the guides recommend deep down.
Yeah.
By the way, you said useRef is easy. Let me just show, this is the documentation.
useRef is super easy, but you're discouraged from using it.
useRef. Okay, this is the docs right here. The very first part of the doc is a code snippet. Const ref container equals useRef, and then you pass an initial value. useRef returns a mutable ref object whose .current property is initialized to the passed argument initial value. The returned object will persist for the full lifetime of the component. Maybe there was another one I was reading. I don't know. This is pretty confusing. useRef returns a mutable ref object whose current property is initialized to the passed argument. The returned object will persist for the full lifetime of the component.
I mean, it's
very confusing.
Yeah, okay.
That's very confusing.
But that's not, if I was at a bar or something, that's not what I would tell them.
A common use case is to access a child imperatively. Essentially, useRef is like a box that can hold a mutable value in its current property. I don't know, man. I've been doing JavaScript for years, and I had to read this like a bunch, and I still get confused by it. You're saying you would just say it's like an object that lives outside of render or something like that.
I would say it's a stable value.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. If you're familiar with like Ember or Vue or whatever, think of it like this. It's a stable object. Your value that you want to persist is going to live in the current property.
Right.
And
yeah, it's a JavaScript object with a current property.
Listen, I every time I have to use it,
yeah,
I feel like I'm not doing React,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel like I'm not doing things correct. But yeah, I think you can just waste a lot of time otherwise, and
I certainly have.
also too, when like you look at a lot of hooks that people author, like if you look at like usePrevious, you know, that uses a ref inside of it. I wouldn't really feel guilty about using usePrevious. I mean, usePrevious is more kind of brings along the imperativeness in its name.
Yeah.
But you know, you just look at a lot of
It
hooks.
just feels
Some
like a
people
different
use
level of
these things.
abstraction. It's previous from what? It's the previous render cycle. It's the previous render cycle of your code.
In a world where we're not supposed to think about lifecycle hooks,
Yeah.
previous feels like it's like way more of a violation.
Yeah. It's literally a different.
I mean, maybe that's it. Like I've never. There's definitely been some bugs in other apps we've worked on where like we get the lifecycle hooks wrong, or we like don't reset state in lifecycle hooks. But maybe there's like a way they could introduce, you know, some lifecycle hooks that are, you know, it's more, like you said, more honest about the situation. That would be fine. I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
Yeah, totally. I would be okay copying and pasting usePrevious if it was in the guides, like more clearly, I guess. It's here in this FAQ here, how to get the previous props or state. Currently, you can do it manually with a ref. This might be a bit convoluted because they have use effect. So you have to use effect and then just update your ref.current to the new value.
Yeah. Right, because their effect runs like async after render. So then by the time the next render happens, it'll be before its use effect happens. So the value of the ref will be from the previous render's use effect. Does that make sense?
Right. So if you didn't have the effect and you just say const name, set name equals use state Ryan, and then you have let my object equals use ref, and then my object dot current equals name, it's going to be Ryan.
Right there. Yeah.
Right there. And then if
So
you
when
call
you- when
set
you-
name Sam, it's going to re-render again.
Name will be Ryan until you get to that one line.
Yeah. Yeah.
The effect is just
Whereas at the beginning of the render, you've already lost Ryan from before, but you basically have it until you call set again. Yeah. Exactly. And then the effect runs afterward, so you can in the effect you can update it basically. You if you call the set in the effect, then you have access to previous for the entire initial run of the function, and then the effect happens basically afterwards. It would be like ember.run.next almost.
Yes.
And
That's actually exactly how you're using it. Yeah, as like a set timeout. You're not even using it as like an effect.
Right.
You're using it as like a set timeout. One
right.
Ember run next,
right.
whatever.
And it's true because Ember run next is absolutely feels like you're doing something wrong. There's usually a better way to do it.
Yep.
Usually you don't have to do it unless you're doing something really tricky, because that is leaking like the event loop and the rendering cycle into your code, and often like Ember gives you guarantees you don't have to do that, and same with React. But like this, it feels like we use this a lot. Use refs way more than run next in Ember code.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I would go as far as say if I have a run next, I don't mind spending a day
getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. This might be a bit convoluted, but you can extract it into a custom hook. usePrevious count. Note how this would work for prop state or any other calculated value. It's possible that in the future React will provide a usePrevious hook out of the box since it's a relatively common use case.
That's funny.
Interesting, right? So that was interesting. I was working on adding a little bit of animation to like the nav bar in the Mirage docs. And when you we were working on this last week together, when you click on one of the sections, like 5 sections, and then it just opens or closes. And so kind of the normal way you're encouraged to do things in React is like you want UI as a function of state. So whenever I do animations, I always try to get the app working with no animations and then layer the animations on top. And so I did that. And so I had something like open sections was a piece of state, and it was like an array of, IDs based on the 5 sections. And then you start out with the current one open, and then as you click, you just add a click handler where you click on it, and it can just toggle that state of is open or not. Okay, all so far so good. Then you want to add animation. So we were using React Spring, which is like also very much this declarative idea of like if you can declare your animations, React Spring will take care of rendering. They actually render outside of the React render cycle, which turns out to be pretty cool. But basically, if that state ever changes, it'll just automatically do it. So it's pretty cool. You bring that in, you use a Spring, and you replace the is open with like the values from the Spring, the height, which you measure with another hook, use measure. And so you can just now animate between 0 and the height. And so if you ever click on a button and change that state, it just works. So it's pretty cool. But then you realize that there's like other ways those things can change. So first, let's say I have like, I've opened all of 5 of the things. And first of all, when you're on an active route, so there's like 3 levels of nesting. There's like introduction, and then there's like main concepts, and then there's like testing. In introduction, there's like an overview, and then that's like a route. That's like /docs/getting started/overview. But then there, what happens is when you activate overview, and that's the active link, we want to show all the headings on the page because it's like a long document. So that's like the within route links, the hash links, the hrefs, like the hash, section.
Table of contents.
Table of contents, exactly. So what that means is that when you click on a link and we add the table of contents to the sidebar, well, now the width has changed, the height has changed. So use measure is going to remeasure all the heights of those sections, and the Spring is going to know that the height changed, and it's going to declaratively rerun the animation. So you would click a link and like things would smoothly change, which is not actually what you wanted, because when you transition a page, like the main section just instantly renders like normally when you click a link, and also the table of contents instantly is added. And so now you have like instant transition, and then like afterwards the sections are kind of readjusting smoothly. Mm-hmm. It's not what you wanted. So then I went down this rabbit hole where I like made like the table of contents also smooth. So like when you would click a link, the old one would shrink and the new one would reveal, and then like the parents would reveal too. So you would think that would be like maybe a more intuitive way to do it. Almost like an animated file tree where like, you could imagine like if you were in code and you had like all of your files and you like open a file, it just everything's smooth, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I didn't really like the way it felt because the main content was painting immediately. So it was strange that you would like transition a route and the content would be there, and then like afterwards all the sidebar would be adjusting. I just didn't want it to animate.
Yeah. There's like animation happening after like the user's perceived transition.
Exactly. And it was like taking focus away, which is not what you want. You want to click the link and then boom, I'm right there, right? So I backed out of that. And then in order to make sure that the animation didn't happen when you route transition, I did something like usePrevious, route.activeRoute, like router.activeRoute. If it's changing, then I actually don't want to animate, right? So I can say immediate is true if the route itself has changed. So now if I change the route, then the heights adjust, but they do it immediately and they don't animate. And this is also good because like when I go back and forward with swiping, it was also happening where not even clicking it, swiping it. So then what happens is you realize there's all these ways that you can change the state that you hadn't thought about, which normally with declarative rendering and building UIs, you want. Normally you want UI as a function of state because when you introduce new ways that the state can change, your UI is always in sync, right?
Yep.
But if you think about where I was coming from here, and I say, all right, I want to add an animation. When the user clicks on the section title, I want it to collapse and expand. Like, that's it. I actually don't want the animation to be derived from the open and close state. I actually want, I'm coding a very specific user interaction, and it's when the user clicks on this thing, and I just want it to open and close. And if there's other vectors in the app by which the user can change that state or change anything about that, I actually don't want that animation to run. And it feels like doing gymnastics to make it so that this declarative animation, which is derived from state, which seems like it's a good solution in the first spot, actually avoids most of the times when state changes, other than the one I'm interested in.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I do. I thought of something like, I think there should be like a React therapist that you just tell these stories and they just respond and they say like, oh, well, are there states that maybe you haven't thought about?
Yeah,
and that's exactly. and then you get billed for like $500. But that's actually exactly what I was.
You laugh because it's really close to home.
That's exactly what I was thinking though. I was like, well, are there like every time we do these animations, we always uncover that there's states that like just we weren't thinking of. Also too, like you kind of identified it at the end. It's you just want it on click. So can you just set something in a click handler that triggers everything? Is that what you ended up doing?
That is what I ended up doing. But this is where it falls apart, dude. So it's true that like the last time we talked about this, there was some state we hadn't thought of, which was like basically resizing the window. And it was like, oh, use measure is refiring and it's causing all this stuff to happen, which is like a pain in the butt. But actually, it's catching like a bug that we would have had if it didn't do it because we weren't accounting for the possibility for those heights to change, right? So we're like, oh, okay, good. Now we're accounting for all of our states and like animation declarative is good to go. So the problem though is, man, like the reality of something like animation is that it breaks down when you do not have all of the states modeled in your domain. So think about the fading in example again. If your app fades in and it takes a second and your app renders 60 frames a second, then there are 60 different states there. And it's completely impractical. No one on the React team would say that you should have that logic modeled in your application.
I mean, I wouldn't even know how to do that, how to approach that.
Well, set state, add what's the request animation frame?
Yeah, and just increment like frame by one in every request animation.
And you
frame.
just set state every frame, every 16th of a second, and you know if your opacity is like 0.61 or something like that.
Based off.
That way you could pause your animations and re-render your app in the correct state, right?
Yep.
Even if it was fading in, or you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
But like that's totally impractical. No one should do that. And so it turns out that like, well, I was talking with Ed on Twitter about this over the weekend, and it's kind of interesting because where do we have the most problems with this? Like UI is a function state. Think about a state machine and how like a router and an SPA is a state machine where you go from like home to about, and all your state is derived from like that URL. When you add animation, is animation a new state or is it a transition between states? Is it at the same level of that business logic and that business application state, or is it at a different level? It's not the boxes, it's the arrow.
But hold on. Is it though? Because like imagine a web app that's transitioning. The router's a really good example. It's transitioning from one route to another and there's animations. Mm-hmm. Like there's still a page rendered while you're in the arrow, while you're in the transition, and you can still potentially interact. Like you could click a link. Imagine a really slow animation between two routes. You could like click another link to a third route.
Or hit the back
button. Yeah. So it does feel like you want
a third box. You're saying like is animating box is like now a new state of your application.
Yeah, you'd want like some way to be able to like, like handle actions that you have on the page, like handle click handlers and maybe like no-op them because you're transitioning.
That's interesting.
I think it.
But like you see what I mean? That's like also the practicality of modeling it in the same way.
Sure.
You could concede at some level it's appropriate to think about it like the two boxes, and then we're really talking about the arrow.
Yeah.
And like also when I'm coding this thing, I'm thinking about this particular arrow here and not any way you get to this thing. It's like I want the box to slide down when the user clicks on it. It's a very particular state transition we're talking about, not any state transition that's here. So think about like think about that, right? Think about creating a new to-do on the server, a post request when you submit the form. Is that like, is that about a transition between states, or is that a new state?
I'm not.
Okay, so let me see where I'm going with this. So
Okay.
the transition logic between two states is hard to model declaratively in a way that is idempotent and can be run over and over again no matter what, right?
Yes.
Because it's fundamentally about transitions. So it's a transition is like imperative,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Move this thing here, slide this thing down, fade this thing. That's all imperative.
Declarative means that I can build the world and then end up render that state.
Yeah.
When you talk about transitions, I don't think about that. I don't think about, build me a world where I'm 75% through this
Exactly.
and then render it.
Exactly.
I don't I would just no.
Exactly. It's just impractical. Apparently it's not how game engines work at all either. This declarative, the way transitions, animations, or movement. The states it's almost like keyframes in Final Cut. You think in terms of the keyframes, not in between.
Okay.
Right? And in the same way, the keyframe is the states, the business logic at the business layer in your application, and then the transition stuff is what's in between. But it's not as easy to express in the same way, or it's not even appropriate to, or you shouldn't even try to. Anyways, my point being, with this application stuff, you really want to say, when I click the button, slide this thing down. That's very imperative, but it actually makes a lot of sense there. Now think about creating a to-do. What have we had a hard time with doing in React as well? Like wrapping up effects, like non-idempotent effects, like creating a to-do on the server into a declarative idempotent function, right? Remember we talked about how the use effect examples show subscribing to a chat API and how that's idempotent, and you can just subscribe, but you can't do that with a lot of APIs, like REST APIs or whatever. And I even getting a resource from the server, if you could just get a million times and your backend DevOps team didn't care about all those, all the requests.
I mean, even front-end developers complain about that.
Exactly.
Why is it requesting it 3 times?
Yeah. But is that because this is what I'm trying to potentially draw a connection with is is it because it's about a transition? Loading is a state and success is a state. How do you get from loading to success? You make a GET request. So is the GET request really about the arrow and not the boxes? And is the conclusion that things that are about the arrows are not a good fit for hooks or trying to be declarative with? And it would be much simpler to just to have a way to say, when I click the button, do this thing. You also want to set is open to true in the parent or whatever, but I want to do this thing at this other layer that's about the transition and shouldn't really bleed into the rest of the code. I don't know, just kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I like that, and I buy it.
I mean, some people have even told us oh yeah, make your network requests in a reducer outside of your React code, right? You have a function outside of the React component. It's not about the lifecycle thing at all. That kind of supports this point, which is you're just calling out, and you're not trying to wrap it, like a cancelable promise or is still rendered and all this stuff. You see what I'm saying? If you had another layer for doing the transition stuff, it might avoid a lot of this confusion and complexity trying to wrap it in a way that makes the React hooks components happy.
Okay.
I don't know. So anyways, right now I just have a should animate state. When you click on the button, should animate to true. The hook runs. It knows it shouldn't be immediate because should animate is true. And then in an effect, I set should animate back to false. And that doesn't even that causes another render, but for some reason the animation finishes. And
I was gonna say, what if the animation was really long?
Yeah, I know.
60
it's weird.
seconds.
It doesn't though.
It's almost like you want to call back on the animation.
I thought about that. There's an on rest. The problem is that it doesn't get called if it's opening while you hit the back button. There's it doesn't. You want should animate to be false immediately, basically, because there's so many ways to transition while the animation's happening. By default, you just don't want it to even be there. React Spring has a really interesting API. So you know how we do like use Spring, and you can say like opacity : is active $1:0, and now if is active changes, whether is active is state or a prop, that use Spring will just run again, and it'll just animate that opacity back and forth. That's like the declarative version.
Mm-hmm.
They also have an imperative version where you say use Spring, you pass in a function that returns opacity 0, let's say it's the starting opacity, and what you get back is a 3-element array. The first is like the props that are animating. The second is a set function, and the third is a stop function. The set function is what you use to actually trigger the animation imperatively. So now you can say on click, set opacity to 1.
I think I saw in the docs,
and they actually say you should prefer this.
Yeah, I think I saw that in the docs that they like this because it avoids
a re-render.
Yeah, exactly, a React render.
Yep.
The whole idea with Spring is you said this earlier, but it's outside of render.
Right.
Can be more efficient.
Right. So that's pretty interesting.
So they give you a stop. So are you like...
I do call stop when you like, if you try to... Yeah, I call stop. I call it for a different one that I scroll to the heading. If you like scroll it or you like click elsewhere, I call stop. This one I don't think I need stop. But
I have a question. Is it?
I think it's just when you go back. If you like, if the thing is opening and you hit the back button or something, it just it re-renders, and I call set like immediately, and immediate is going to be false because like the route's changed or something like that. It's kind of crazy.
Okay.
It's okay. It's okay. I think. Yeah, it's just interesting. It's very interesting. Like.
I was thinking you really have...
It's like you click a button and you want to do the thing. There's some times where that's the right mental model, and there's some times where it's not. Sam from 2012, who clicked on a panel and clicked slide down, and that was it, was wrong because there's other ways to introduce whether something's open or not. The parent needs to set something is open, and you have all that logic in that imperative click handler, and it's not going to respond. So you always want the UI to be a function of state in the sense that your UI should be accurate if your state changes, right? So you can't put all your logic in the handlers. But for this case, like clicking a button to slide this thing open, if you can model it with the state over here, but then you can layer the animation on imperatively in a separate thing just for this one interaction, feels right. So it's kind of interesting.
It is. What? Okay, so definitely agree that you want to model all the state without animations.
Yeah.
Do it in a declarative way.
Yeah.
Introduce a click handler. I guess I'm not like sure why you need to go to imperative right when you introduce the click handler. Like, could you? There's basically like you click, you set some state. Now there's going to be like a declarative animation, and if the component unmounts, we cancel the animation, or we make it immediate. Or if the animation ends, we make it immediate. That does me saying that mean like, okay, we're in an imperative world, like just
but it's just the problem is that you're having to think about you can do it quote declaratively. The problem is that when you first go to code it, you say, oh, okay, I'm going to add some animation. Use Spring. If is active is open is true, height is going to be height. Otherwise, it's going to be 0. Boom, I'm done. And so you think you're done because when you click the button, you set the state and it works. But you have forgotten to account for all of the other ways that can change, both that the state can change and that the component can re-render. And the way you just coded that thing means that animation is going to run every time any of those things happen. And that's not actually what you wanted to do at all. Whereas when you're normally building UI, that is what you want to do. If the username changes, I want it to be reflected up here where it's showing it in the title bar, no matter how it changes. That is what you want. But here, that's not what you want. So you end up doing all this backflips where you say, oh, only when I click should it animate. Oh, have we thought of everything? Like there was something else that happened where, there was one more thing. There's like the parent needed to, once you switch routes, the parent needs to like reset the default values for all is open and is closed. And dude, it's just ridiculous. Like, I'll show you the code. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The child can't use the is open and is closed. So yeah, if like the parent owns the state, but the child needs to be able to toggle back and forth, it's almost like you need a default value. And then once you click the button, you like overwrite the parent and you do this, or you send it back up and then should animate is true and it works. But like, it's just very confusing. So I feel like it's very, very confusing and not at all. It's not good. Like, it's not, and I don't think it's me. I think it's this, I just think there's a better way to do it, basically. It doesn't feel appropriate. Have I made my point yet? The declarative API does not feel suitable for this kind of part of the UI development. And I also feel the same way for things like doing post requests or other non-idempotent actions. It feels like sometimes there's benefits. Yes. Like, your example from like whatever, 4 months ago with the form, and you haven't thought about that. That is a
classic example.
That is a classic example. And that's what the guides stress over and over again, that there's all these bugs that we had in components that weren't declarative and re-rendered all the time. And, but the problem is, what if you have more bugs with a code that you do right? So anyways.
Or just if the code is just harder to write.
Yeah.
Like, we can have a buggy form that doesn't reset when its values change, but that might be like a rare thing.
Yeah.
And it's easy to write, versus something where it's like, I'm juggling all these callbacks and state sets.
Right.
So
just to conclude on this topic, one thing that's been frustrating about React Spring is that it's been in like limbo between version 8 and version 9 for like a year.
So we like upgrade for some things, downgrade for some other.
And like the stop function wasn't working for me. And so I upgraded it, but like, I don't think we can because of,
I think there was something else.
There was something else. So that's kind of a bummer. It is a really cool library. I found this other library. When we decided to first learn it and use it, I had done a little bit of research and just try to figure out, what the like go-to animation libraries in React were. And I knew there were a bunch, but like this one seemed to have a pretty strong consensus around it. But over the weekend, I was looking into Framer Motion.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So I hadn't really, it's very confusing to me because you have Framer, Framer X, Framer Motion, Framer, there's something else.
Framer Motion was something else before. I forget the name.
Started with a P.
Yeah.
Pop Motion.
Sounds right.
Not Pop Motion. It's
there was a post I found when I was going through this, and Spring is more lower level.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at Framer Motion as something like Flip, the way we think of like Ember animated.
Pop Motion.
Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah.
The React Spring guy said that
Paul.
Yeah. Someone asked why Spring over these other libraries, and he said that like you can do Spring is more lower level. You have to like build all this stuff yourself, as we saw with like our fade component. He made a point that's like eventually you're going to want something
to drop down,
and you're not going to be able to with these high level libraries. So you might as well buy into Spring.
Interesting. He said that even about Framer Motion.
I think
because Framer Motion wasn't even released, I think, until like last summer.
It's really new. It was something else though.
Yeah.
I think it was a comparison.
Oh, the Pop Motion.
Yeah, I think it was a comparison between that.
Interesting.
I think that just sort of, I think it's good that we know Spring.
Yeah.
And I think it's good that we use it. I think more our style is like a Flip library.
Yeah. I think Framer Motion is going to be what I try next because I saw a bunch of people say really good things about it in the React community. Jared Palmer, some other people who I know have been doing React for years, and also like it's maintained very well. The docs are like really, really cool, and the API seems like a lot simpler for the kinds of stuff we want to do right now.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to give it a shot. But pretty interesting. So that was all for nav and table of contents in the site, because we want to make it easier to add some guides pages. People have been using Mirage a bunch with different things, but sometimes they'll say like, does it work with Next? And someone will try it and they'll kind of get it working. So one of our focuses is just making sure people's first run experience with whatever stack they're using is good. And like sometimes we see great. You know, oh, I just got it. I just installed it in my project and it just worked and it's just amazing. So that's really encouraging to hear. So we want to make sure, you know, right now, if you're using GraphQL, like you're just going to go on the site and you're not going to find anything about it really. So we need to add like a little guide there. Anyways, that's what all that work was about supporting. But
Nice.
where are we at time?
40 minutes.
Oh man, I can really rant about declarative and imperative code for a while. Didn't we have something last week we want to talk about? You
don't
and
have my
your
phone.
DevOps madness.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Hot take is Dependabot good. Fire.
We can do that.
Yeah, let's lay it on me, brother.
Is Dependabot good? It needs to be
Obviously,
more.
yes.
It needs to be more than that.
Dependabot won the Oscar for best film.
Is Dependabot really as good as you think it is? Something like that.
No, yours is good. Yours is going to get the retweets.
The retweets.
Yeah, the
hot take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I know something with Dependabot where, so I guess before I start, like, I'll bury the lead here. I love Dependabot. I think it's great as a programmer, knowing that my dependencies just get PRs and I can see the test pass and I can read the release notes all right in the PR and then click merge. And when I actually have to go to do a big upgrade, like turns out that saves me hours and hours and hours of work of upgrading dependencies. I noticed that, so here's why Dependabot's bad. I noticed that it shifts the burden from, it makes like the application developer's life easier and it pushes all this bullshit onto your ops team.
And when you're both the same one,
And when
the
you're
same
both
person,
it really,
you
it
start
does
really getting angry at yourself.
It really, you don't realize that that there's like this trade-off. And again, as the application
I still
developer,
don't because you are the one who shovels all that shit for me.
as the application developer, it's great.
Yeah.
But it does, you're not thinking about, is this going to put a burden on my ops life?
So talk about some of the burdens.
Yeah. So first of all this can be solved with money, right? Like not even like just really easy entering your credit card money, not like, oh, we have to go hire 10 new engineers because that involves other stuff.
Right.
This is just money and that's it. So when you start using Dependabot, you're going to be getting a lot of pull requests, and those pull requests are going to trigger CI runs. And then as you merge like one pull, say you have like 10 pull requests open, you merge one pull request that might change some dependencies in the other pull requests. So all those are going to rerun. So you're constantly running your CI servers. And so that's going to
That's the main part. That's the main cost.
Well, so here's also what I realized. Like we do on EmberMap, we have branch deploys. So you open a PR, you get a brand new deploy where you can just see the whole entire world, front end, back end,
Services.
for your PR. Yep, services for your PR. So this means, if you're developing, 3 features a week, 1 or 2 features a week, it's not really a big deal because you're setting up 1 or 2 like low performance staging boxes. But again, with Dependabot, you're now getting, 10 a day. So yeah, there's just a lot, like your CI, your staging, that just all explodes. And what we've done.
And this happened on multiple projects of ours that we help run.
I mean, I think every project that uses these.
Yeah.
So for CI, we used to run CI across like 16 or like 32 nodes on high performance computers. And, our Ember test suites that would take like 20 minutes to run on your computer would take like 3 minutes to run. Shout out to Ember Exam. Now, like, that was just too expensive. Like the bill just skyrocketed.
Right.
And so we downgraded and we're now running across like 2 slow machines for everything.
Right.
We disabled branch deploys for some of our like non-active projects. And I know it's like MirageJS.com is going through the same thing now, where our branch deploys are starting to get expensive.
We just added like Percy, so like everything.
Yeah, our Percy snapshots were like after a day of Percy, we're already at like 12% of our plan
or whatever. Yeah.
Now again, this is like can all be solved with money, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is, like,
And it's good from the perspective of like, well, why would you, if you're bumping the dev dependency of, what's a good example, like left pad or something like that you're using in one little node script, do you really need to check that the website renders the same? But on the other hand, it's like, what if you bump Tailwind or something minor version and how else would you know that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, again, from like the application developer's point of view, this stuff, it's really hard to make an argument against this. Like
right. It's almost ideal.
Yes.
I mean, really.
Yeah. How many times have you upgraded something or changed something and it's had some effect on some other part of your app that you didn't really think about or you didn't really expect? Happens all the time.
Totally.
It just pushes it onto your ops. For ops, you either have to spend more money or come up with some creative ways for running this stuff. I think like maybe like the long-term solution here is like these CI services. It's so funny too, because like these CI services, they must love Dependabot.
That's true.
They must be
That's true.
We are making like
That's true.
we have all these customers that just like 10x their plans. What happened? And like you go look in, it's like, oh, they're all Dependabot PRs.
They're like, great, we should open up like 5 competitors Dependabot. Make sure everyone has this thing going.
I would love a service like Dependabot opens PRs at like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I don't need CI to run in 2 minutes, 3 minutes at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
It can take 6 hours. So I would love a CI service that worked with this workflow.
Also, it's not even their time. It's like the dependency updates can always take longer. Even in the middle of the day, you're not usually needing to frantically bump a version of Lodash or something. So if you could look for a tag that says Dependabot and say,
or if I am frantically bumping it, it's going to be like a PR that I open.
Yes,
it's opened by a human.
Exactly.
And so those, I wish that those could be built.
Sorry, man. I mean, DevOps is like the most fascinating
putting you to
subject ever.
sleep.
It just literally made me yawn. I feel bad. Hopefully, no one's just driving to work right now, steering off the road.
All these problems.
Let's get back to state.
All these
and
problems.
Props and imperative and declarative. No, but if you could say if the issue is from Dependabot, right?
It's from a machine.
Yeah, put it on a lower tier or whatever.
Yep.
What about? I was also thinking like that seems like one good solution to me. Another one is like, could you batch these things? I mean, one of the beauties of Dependabot is like you're changing the fewest things at once as possible, which is like one dependency. So if you were to say, if you were to write it once every Friday and just bump to latest every dependency you have, now you get in a spot where you're losing some of the benefits.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I don't know if it's Dependabot, but I know I've seen services that can do that. I think maybe even Dependabot can do that. But I wouldn't like that. Just is pushing this back on the application developer now. Like as an application developer, I wouldn't.
You don't want to have to debug that PR. Yeah, totally.
Also, too, like if you just look at this strictly from like money and cost,
it's an easy problem to solve. It seems way easier.
Right. It's way easier to just expect to pay 4x, 5x for all your servers. And
are you working for Travis over there, buddy?
Yeah.
Way it's than any amount of time that you're gonna have to ask your app dev team to debug stuff like that for sure.
For companies that I've worked for before, it's very, very hard for you to just ask the ops team to just add this to your budget because it's going to make our lives easier.
You're saying even at an objective level, it is probably mostly the case that objectively this is the most efficient way to solve this problem. But
100%.
The DevOps teams or the budgeting or the politics of it is going to make it difficult.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard because you're going to be, the lonely app dev, are going to have to justify why this is taking up so much of your time and have to explain that it would be way faster to just, I can see that being a tough
even us, like we control both sides. Mm-hmm. So it's really just like an internal battle in our heads to
right. And you're saying even then you feel a tug of like, I'll just do this myself or something like that. But it's just
just like, do I really want to, like, our hosting was $250 a month. Do I really want to spend $800 a month on hosting? Like, So, it's tough.
Right.
Still think it's worth it.
Right. But it changes it. Interesting. I'd be interested to hear if any listener have experience with this. I'm sure if you're at a bigger org, you've run through these issues faster than we have.
Yeah.
And have maybe had some new learnings and stuff. So that'd be interesting to hear. But yeah, man, even in the last year or two, just like people we've worked with, clients and mentoring companies and stuff, like people are just more updated than they've ever been at any time I've ever worked as a programmer. Like people working on apps that have been around for years and they're on like Ember 3.15.
Yeah.
And it's like that wouldn't have happened without that, right?
Yep.
Something like that. So that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. And it's just pretty cool to know that like our projects aren't going to just atrophy, you know? Because we have like a lot of things going on now, and it's just nice to know that things stay up to date more or less for the most part, you know?
Yeah, and when something does break, you find out about it
Yes.
really, really soon.
Yeah, so it's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Okay, so the hot take is
It's still good.
Dependabot is a like a wealth, it's like a privileged
It's a
service.
privilege, yeah.
It's like a capitalist.
But it's free. It's
No,
free.
Not for your DevOps team, it's not.
You know, that would be cool. It'd be cool if like CI servers, like Dependabot is actually a better feature. It's a feature that should come with your CI service.
That's actually interesting.
Rather than your code hosting service.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they could reduce the cost themselves.
Right.
Rather than me having to figure out how do I
Right.
make this thing cheap as possible.
Right.
Again, I think this is like a common. I've emailed a few CI providers that we've used about this, and they've basically said like, "Yeah, we know." So maybe someone will come up with some feature for this, which would definitely make my life easier.
Right. If enough people are in the same boat we are, then they're going to have to start. They will start to compete on this dimension in some way.
Yes.
Either by offering a thing that lowers the cost or doing something. You set up GitHub Actions recently. How was that?
Oh yeah.
Because I don't know about any of that. The last thing I did was set up Travis like a year ago on some repository or when we did Mirage or something. And so I don't know what the latest and greatest there is.
Yeah. GitHub Actions is really cool. It's incredibly frustrating. Incredibly.
Is it like React Spring frustrating? Like low level?
It's let me talk about like the good stuff. So first it's your CI lives in your code hosting service, which is kind of the dream. I think it's so cool that
it's one of the what you were just talking about, right? They're more integrated. There's more stuff they can do.
Yeah. It works like it kind of works like Travis. Like you configure a YAML file with all these commands to run. The idea is there's like actions. So at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of commands. Run this if the exit status is 0. Run this. If everything successfully exits, CI passes. With Travis, you always had to like write out those commands in a YAML file. With GitHub Actions, there's actions, packages called actions, and what they're like higher level things that boil down to commands.
Oh, interesting. I was thinking actions were like lower level.
No. They're higher level. So I'll have
like jobs or whatever, or
you still have jobs. So jobs are like CI deployment, publish add-on docs, stuff like that. But the action would be like setup node. So instead of me, I guess like Travis, just you specify like node :6 and you get node 6.
Declarative.
But actions you can think of as like just this thing that I guess it is declarative. It's more like higher level.
A little higher level, yeah.
So you'd say like there's an action called setup node that's going to go download the node version, set it up, set up npm, all that stuff. So it's really cool that there's a bunch of these high level things.
And are they provided by GitHub? Are they like official actions, or
they're both? So there's a lot of official actions, and then there are a lot of
badly maintained, abandoned actions.
Yeah,
now running on your core infrastructure.
For something that's 6 months old, you'd be surprised how many just unmaintained.
Every action is a repo. I'm guessing that's pretty cool.
They have like the file. You have like a .workflow directory. And in there you have a bunch of YAML files, like a main.yaml. And when you go, you can like edit files in GitHub. When you're editing this file, on the right hand side of the screen,
It's like a search.
is a search for all these packages.
That's cool. I think I saw that in the like the presentation they did.
Yeah. So this is one of the
benefits.
amazing things about it. You're not like really thinking at the level of like, oh, I'm setting up CI to run all this stuff. You're just like, okay, I need to yarn install. Let me just search for yarn, and you can find all these things. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Are there going to be things like Ember set up or like React set up?
People have made a few Ember ones.
Just too high level right now.
Yeah,
But you could imagine it being an official thing.
The Cypress one is really good. Like they put a lot of time into it. They have awesome docs.
That's
so
cool.
There's like a Cypress. Just run Cypress, and then
That's pretty cool.
all you do is just include the Cypress package. So that's like the high level stuff. That's the stuff that's really exciting because it's no longer about me writing a bash script to run on Jenkins. It's
configuring path and none of that stuff.
Yeah, no dumping env to figure out what's wrong. The frustrating stuff is there's still like you got to like dive into this low level. I don't really understand how Git works, which I know Git is easy and everyone understands it. There's like a difference between pull requests, pushes, and forks. So I had this all configured for pushes. And so because me, you, Dependabot all have access to the repo, when we open up a pull request, we're working in our repo with a branch on our repo.
It's like if you were to git checkout branch.
Yeah.
And then compare it. You're not pushing anything.
Well, we're working in our repo, and we're opening a pull request with a branch on our repo. So we're like pushing to our repo. And so we have access to the action. We have access to like everything that was set up in the action.
Okay.
This is what I did when I set it up, and it worked. And then I think 3 or 4 days later, I got a pull request from someone else.
Okay.
And someone else, if you think about their workflow, they're not working off our repo.
They fork.
And then so they have their own repo.
So there's no push event.
There's no push
pull request.
Yeah, it's just a pull request. So I changed the config to work off pull requests. But now we lose it for master, right? Because you're not pull requesting master into master. Master, when you merge, that's like a separate thing. So now I changed it so we have a pull request against master or a push to master that covers all the use cases.
I see, because if I just edited something and pushed to master,
you lose it. Yeah,
you want that.
That's not a pull request.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I had to understand.
Yeah.
And this sounds like, oh, that's so simple, but when you're working at this high level of installing packages at setup node, and then it feels like, oh wow, I just dropped way down to get all this. The other thing is when you set up secrets. So we have we do add-on docs deploys, we do npm deploys, we do Percy runs. All those things have some sort of secret or token. And when someone opens a pull request, again, they're going from their repo to a pull request. So they don't have access to our secrets.
Interesting.
So we can't run
Percy. Wait. Okay, so what did you do?
Well, there's nothing right now.
How does that work on Travis? Oh, Travis has access to it. So if Travis is running any build.
Yeah, because Travis, GitHub Actions are built into GitHub, and they're built into Git. This is why I started this off by saying I don't really understand Git. Travis is more like this third-party service that just watches your interactions with GitHub and knows what to do. Where Actions, this actually makes me think I wonder if Actions are fundamentally flawed because they're built into the repo, or maybe they just need to offer some high-level API that's this is a really big issue. People have CI code coverage. Doesn't run with GitHub Actions because, again, when someone opens a fork, they don't have the secrets.
So wait, what did you do about the Percy thing? Doesn't work?
I talked to Rob at Percy, and we went back and forth about this, and it doesn't work. I basically asked him, I don't even want to say this on the podcast.
Okay.
But I basically asked him, look, the Percy key, does it really need to be private? It's just for uploading screenshots, and like really anyone.
Oh, you're saying even if you were on a paid account for a private thing, it's like a bucket. It's like having a bucket.
Yeah,
that's
it's like having a
post only or something like that.
Look, if the key was private, someone could still open up a pull request with a bunch of like nude pictures, and that would still be uploaded, right? So who cares if the key is public? And
Right.
he was like, yeah, that's fine. We've never had an incident with this.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm going to do.
But
the
still,
reason I don't want to say this on the podcast is because now it's just public knowledge that our key is going to be in some YAML file.
Okay,
somewhere.
it's not going to be encrypted. It's not going to be secret.
Right,
anymore.
right. It's like,
but hold on. But that's a one-off solution for Percy. This is not solve the general problem.
so for things like add-on docs, which require an upload, we don't actually do uploads on pull requests. So we don't actually need that to run. Uploads only happen when you merge into master, and that's me or you merging into our repo.
Okay.
So our repo.
What about test coverage thing that had an AP? There's no way around it.
There's no way around
Hold on, let me
this.
think about this. Hold on.
GitHub. There's there's like issues that are like 3 miles long on like the GitHub Actions form about this.
The actions are running. So if Joe opens a pull request against Mirage, Joe's not a collaborator, so Joe has forked it and has the PR. The actions are running as if they were like inside of Joe's code base.
Yeah, and they're running against Joe's fork. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of.
It's super weird. It's like, it's very, very strange. So just where this is going, and I don't know what GitHub is going to do. They have some tokens. They're specific to GitHub. So there's like a GitHub API key that every action has access to, regardless of what repo it's run in, and it's hidden. So there's no way that you can fork my repo and get my GitHub API token.
Okay.
But you do have access to it in your
Okay.
action. So there is some sort of thing
Gotcha.
here. The other thing they talked about is like, I can like write things as like trusted actions. So like if I'm using Percy, I can just give the Percy action my token. And if you fork my repo and you do anything different, like you change that Percy action to another action, that's like email Sam
Right.
all the ENV vars,
Right.
like that would be like, that like would be a violation. Like it would be like
pass,
untrusted.
Like, yeah.
This is sort of how Travis does NPM deploys. Travis runs you can't just like dump.
I was just gonna say, like, what if someone like we have a logic in Travis YAML that's like, if you're on master and you've passed all the tests, run npm publish. Someone could open a PR that has a change to the Travis.yaml and just like publishes crap, you
Right.
know. But they can't do that because
Well, they can't do that. So the way that Travis works is that NPM thing, it only runs when the branch is master. So only we have access to do that.
but that's set in the Travis YAML, right?
Yeah, that's set in the Travis YAML. And Travis has our NPM keys,
Right.
but it doesn't expose those.
Right.
So if you were to like if you could open up a PR against Mirage and you could do like env, you could change our Travis YAML, just run a command env, then open the PR, go over to Travis,
Look
and
at
you
the
just
output.
see all the env output. But the npm deploy keys aren't stored in env.
Right.
They only run in a separate like brand new deploy container. So there's nothing like you as a user can do to get access to those keys.
Could you change the Travis YAML and have the PR build like do something different, side effecty, based on changes to what's the security there? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We have like side effects in our Travis file, right?
The security is we have like, I forget what Travis calls them. I think they call them the deploy keys.
Yeah.
And those deploy keys aren't visible. Like, so there's no way you can see them or run them. They're only visible to like, there's like a way you can like run npm deploy. No one can open a PR that just deploys. Like that has to like come from master or whatever.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. Interesting. Tricky stuff. Huh.
I think like I'm kind of doubting myself as I say this. I would want to like play with it, but I know that Travis,
There's
they have like a whole deploy section and you can like lock that down yourself. and that doesn't expose things in like env variables or anything like that.
It'd be good to look back at it, but it's just interesting because it's related to all of this, which is like you have a CI service set up somewhere that has permissions.
Right. To give GitHub credit, theirs is like the base layer, most secure.
Yeah. It's making things hard. It's not insecure in any way. It's making things that are secure, but are
frustrating.
Frustrating, right?
That's what
right.
like difficult. Yeah, difficult.
Yeah. They're not right. They went in that direction as opposed to the opposite. Man, that plant is really looking good.
Yeah,
look at that guy. Wow.
There's some other things like that. There's again we're not the only people to run into this. Tons of other people have run into this. They've talked about having like API endpoints where you can like access tokens and they'll be like invisible, like you won't be able to dump them, you won't be able to print them to the screen, so we can like access tokens and use them. But again, I'm not sure. That's all like just high level ideas. I'm not sure what that will actually look like or how they'll do it in a way that
gets around these problems. Okay, so if you're starting a project today and you want to set up CI for a new open source project or a website or something, what would you use?
I mean, GitHub Actions is really...
You think it's the future?
If they can solve these problems, and to be fair, it's only been around for like 6-9 months.
Yeah.
It's fast. So like our Travis builds take forever, and I switched storefront from Travis to GitHub Actions, and I get feedback in like 5 minutes compared to it was like 55 minutes before. Yeah. It's incredibly fast.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I would still use GitHub Actions. I think if you have a lot of third-party services, like if you're doing code coverage and you're doing Percy and you're doing all these things, I would probably use GitHub Actions and make your keys public. But if that's a non-starter for you, then I would stick with Circle. Circle's pretty good. So
nice. Man, you could be, if this whole EmberMap and the React videos and all this stuff, Mirage stuff doesn't work out, you could just be a consultant for CI companies.
Yeah.
You sound excited about that possibility. All right, with that being said, let's get back to some Mirage work you got for us on deck. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.